In the quiet countryside of medieval Europe, before electricity, before the ticking of clocks, and long before the endless scrolling of screens, people lived by rhythms we've mostly forgotten. The day began with the sun and ended when darkness fell. Time moved slowly. The hours were marked not by alarms or schedules, but by the rising and setting of light. For the average peasant, life was hard, but the nights were still and simple and long. In those days, the sleep of peasants was guided by nature. When the sun disappeared below the horizon, there was little reason to stay awake. Candles were costly. Torches and hearths flickered low. The body, having worked through the day in fields or in cottage tasks, welcomed rest easily. With nothing much to do after sundown, people would drift into sleep not long after the sky darkened. Unlike modern sleep, which tries to fit into 7-hour blocks between obligations and digital noise, medieval sleep was segmented. That is to say, people didn't sleep straight through the night. They experienced what is now known as first sleep and second sleep. After the first few hours of slumber, they would wake naturally. It might be around midnight. They might stay up for an hour or two. Then they would return to bed, falling into their second sleep until morning. This period of wakefulness wasn't seen as a problem. It wasn't anxiety or restlessness. It was expected. During this time between sleeps, peasants might pray, speak softly to their families, tend to the fire, or simply lie in bed, reflecting. Some would take a walk outside if the weather was calm. Others might engage in quiet, routine tasks. But always, the night was respected. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't filled with bright light or noise. Sleep came and went in waves, naturally. Homes were small, often 1 or 2 rooms shared by the whole family. Privacy was rare, but warmth was shared. Beds were made of straw or simple wooden frames, stuffed with hay, wool, or even feathers if one was lucky. Blankets were woven from thick cloth or animal skins. And though it may seem uncomfortable to us now, the body adjusted. Comfort, in those days, was different. The day's labor created a natural readiness for rest. There were no gym workouts or screen fatigue. There was the steady, physical tiredness of having lived the day fully in one's body. The air inside these homes was cool. Windows, if they existed, were small and unglazed. The scent of burning wood lingered. Outside, animals might rustle in pens. A dog might bark. But overall, the world at night was quieter. There was no humming of machines, no headlights, no distant traffic, only the dark and the stillness it carried. Medieval society, especially among peasants, also had a surprisingly relaxed attitude toward time. The modern sense of strict punctuality did not exist. Life moved more slowly. There were seasonal rhythms. Religious calendars dictated feast days and fasts, rest days and work days. The church bells might chime to mark canonical hours, but most peasants measured their time with the sun, with tasks, with meals, and with sleep. And though life was undoubtedly difficult, marked by illness, poverty, and hardship, it was also, in many ways, physically aligned with the natural world. The sleep that emerged from such a life was often deep. It was not tracked by devices. It was not scheduled between deadlines. It was allowed to happen, the way the body was meant to sleep. In phases, in darkness, in quiet. In fact, historical accounts and studies of sleep patterns before the industrial era suggest that this way of sleeping, segmented, slow, and unstructured, may have been healthier than our current sleep. The waking period between first and second sleep often brought feelings of calm and reflection. People might remember dreams. They might write, or pray, or simply think. Then, when they were ready, they returned to bed and resumed sleep. This biphasic pattern has been largely lost in the modern age. The introduction of artificial light, of work shifts, and of entertainment that never ends, has compressed sleep into a narrow band of time. We chase sleep now. We treat it like a commodity. But for medieval peasants, sleep came when it came. It was not a problem to solve. It was a rhythm to live by. So, as you listen to this, and begin to slow down for your own rest, imagine a small wooden cottage on a gentle hill. The fire has burned low. Outside, The wind whispers in the trees. The fields are quiet. Inside, a peasant family sleeps closely, the soft sounds of breath filling the room. They have no alarm to wake them. No glowing lights to keep them up. Just the steady silence of the medieval night, and the long, unhurried sleep it brings. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts drift. In a moment, we'll continue this journey through the sleep habits of the past. But for now, you can simply rest. The world is quiet here. In the gentle hush of a medieval village, where the flickering fire marked the center of home and life moved without hurry, sleep was not an interruption. It was a continuation of the day's rhythm. And for the peasant, who spent hours under the sky, walking the furrows of the land, lifting and carrying, harvesting and mending, sleep was not elusive. It came with the ease of exhaustion, and with the comfort of simple expectations. Their bodies, trained by repetition and routine, knew when it was time to rest. They didn't lie in bed staring at ceilings or counting sheep. They didn't calculate how many hours remained until morning. Time, for them, was not dissected into minutes or managed by clocks. It unfolded. It passed gently. And when night came, so too did the quiet. For peasants, the very act of sleeping was communal. Homes were modest. 1 or 2 rooms, often dirt-floored. The family bed might consist of a simple straw mattress laid directly on the ground, or a wooden frame shared by parents and children. Privacy, as we imagine it now, was unknown. But warmth, closeness, and stillness were constants. People fell asleep beside their children, near the embers of the fire, perhaps listening to the distant howl of wind or the snort of a pig in the yard. There was no need to create sleep rituals or curate ambient noise. Life itself led naturally into slumber. By the time dusk arrived, most had already prepared for bed. Not through a checklist of tasks, but simply by slowing down. The chores were done. The fields lay still. The village was quiet. There were no shops, no emails, no streaming distractions. Only the closing of the day, and the welcome calm that followed. The first sleep began soon after dark. And because people followed the sun, the length of sleep changed with the seasons. In winter, when night stretched long across the land, people slept more. Not just more hours, but deeper. The cold outside encouraged staying under blankets. The long nights created long rests. In summer, the light lingered, and though peasants still worked hard, their sleep shifted with the warmth and brightness. This natural alignment with daylight created what scientists now call circadian synchronization. That is, the body's inner clock was in harmony with the sun. It responded to light and dark the way it evolved to. There were no artificial lights to disrupt melatonin. No screens to interfere with rest. Just the slow fade of firelight and the darkness that followed. Sometime after midnight, many would naturally awaken. Not in panic, not startled. It was a soft awakening. The mind clear, the body still. This was the space between first and second sleep. For many, it was a sacred, even treasured time. They would stay in bed, lying still. Or they might whisper softly, stir the fire back to life, perhaps take a sip of water or wine. The world around them remained mostly silent. There were no glowing clocks to glance at. No urgency to fall back asleep. Only the gentle acceptance of the night's middle. Some might use this time to pray. In religious households, prayers at night were common. Quiet recitations, murmured softly, not to disturb others. Others would reflect on dreams, or even write, if they had the means. In wealthier homes, candles or oil lamps might allow for a small amount of reading or quiet handiwork. But for most peasants, the in-between time was still and restful. Not quite awake, not quite asleep. A peaceful limbo. Then, after an hour or two, the second sleep would begin. Often deeper than the first. The mind, having briefly stirred, would settle more completely. Some historical records even suggest that dreams during second sleep were more vivid, more meaningful. And when the morning came, it came slowly. The cock crowed. The light crept in through the slats. People awoke naturally, not yanked from rest by bells or devices. Just the gradual return of day. Their bodies, though sore from labor, were also well rested in a way few modern people experience. They had slept when their bodies wanted to. They had awakened when it felt natural. And they had not fought the night, or filled it with stimulation. They had let it carry them, gently, from one day to the next. Even the concept of sleep problems was different. Insomnia, as we know it, was rarely mentioned. When someone awoke at night, it wasn't viewed as a disorder. It was seen as normal. The body's pattern. There was no anxiety about getting enough sleep, because there were no benchmarks to compare it to. People did not count hours. They did not track sleep quality. They slept as they lived, according to need, not numbers. And it's worth remembering that this peacefulness came not from comfort, but from rhythm. The beds were hard. The clothes were rough. The food was simple. But the sleep was good because it was aligned. The mind was not overstimulated. The body was tired. And the world, at night, offered no reason to stay awake. Only the moon, the stars, and the occasional flicker of fire. Even illness and old age, though harsh in those times, were often treated with sleep. Rest was seen not just as recovery, but as remedy. A sick child would be wrapped in blankets and left to rest. A tired worker would take to bed without guilt. There was no pressure to push through fatigue. No celebration of hustle. Rest was part of life, not an interruption of it. And so, as you lie here now, in a different world, with a different kind of noise, you might still borrow something from the peasants of old. Not their hardships, not their hunger, but their sense of time, their stillness, their ability to welcome sleep not as a task, but as a gift. There is nothing to solve now, nothing urgent to do, just the quiet unfolding of night, the way it always has. Let your breath slow again. Let the thoughts that buzz begin to fade. The peasants are sleeping now, in their small cottages, under their woolen blankets, beside the glowing embers. And so, perhaps, can you? As the quiet rhythm of medieval life continued across the seasons, sleep remained not a luxury but a constant, expected part of the day's unfolding. There were no bedtime routines curated by books or experts. No endless products promising deeper rest. Just the earth, the fire, the weather, and the cycle of work and restoration. Sleep was not optimized. It simply was. Medieval peasants, contrary to the dramatic images painted by popular media, did not live every hour in fear or filth. Life was hard. Yes, it demanded strength, persistence, and acceptance. But it also had an unhurried, organic rhythm that modern life has largely forgotten. And nowhere was this rhythm more evident than in the way they rested. Their homes, if you could call them that, were usually built with timber frames and wattle and daub walls. Roofs made of thatch, floors made of earth or stone. Inside, the furniture was sparse. A bench, a stool, a hearth, and, of course, a bed. Or something close to it. A frame of wood, sometimes without even that, layered with straw, hay, perhaps some feathers if they were lucky, covered in cloth or woolen blankets, coarse but warm. It was not luxury, but it was sufficient. It served its purpose. The warmth of the hearth was essential. In winter especially, people slept near the fire. The glow, dim and amber, flickered against the walls and ceiling. The smoke, though unpleasant at times, also helped to preserve warmth and drive off pests. There were no chimneys in early medieval homes. Smoke simply rose and drifted through a hole in the roof, or through gaps in the thatch. This meant the interior often smelled of wood smoke, and clothes, bedding, hair, all held that scent. But the fire was more than heat. It was also a companion, a sign of safety. It was stoked before bed, so that embers remained alive through the night. It provided a kind of nightlight, if one could call it that, not bright, but softly glowing. Enough to see by if one rose in the dark. Enough to comfort. Peasants didn't sleep alone. Most families slept together. Parents, children, and often even animals. Chickens roosted in corners. Dogs curled up by the door. Pigs, in some poorer homes, shared the same room, sometimes even the same bedding. Warmth was more important than separation. And this closeness meant that the body grew used to other bodies. To movement, to snoring, to the sounds of settling, breathing, shifting. These were not disturbances. They were part of sleep itself. Unlike modern people who often obsess over creating a perfectly silent and dark environment, medieval peasants didn't have such expectations. They adapted to what was. Light came from candles or oil lamps, used sparingly. Darkness was expected and accepted. And sounds, the creak of beams, the rustle of animals, the distant murmur of wind or night creatures, these were not intrusions. They were familiar, even comforting. The concept of sleep hygiene, of managing blue light exposure, of adjusting mattress firmness, none of that existed. And yet, the average peasant likely got more true rest than many people do today. Not because their conditions were perfect, but because their minds were less cluttered. The pressures of modern consciousness, the endless tasks, reminders, distractions, thoughts, simply did not exist in the same way. They worried, of course, about harvests, about taxes, about illness. But they also accepted what they could not control. If it rained, they stayed in. If it snowed, they bundled up. If crops failed, they hoped the next year would be better. Sleep was not a victim of these concerns. It was a necessity, not a privilege. Labor in the fields was hard, repetitive, physical. It demanded the whole body. Hours spent sowing, reaping, bending, carrying. Tools were basic, and protection from weather was minimal. So when evening came, fatigue was total. It was not mental fatigue as we now know it, not the scattered exhaustion from screen time or decision-making, but physical depletion. A tiredness that sank into the bones. And that kind of tiredness makes for deep sleep. It is the kind of sleep that arrives without effort. Without the need for melatonin supplements or guided meditations. It comes because the body is ready. Because the mind is quiet. And because the night has few alternatives. Most people were illiterate. Books were rare, expensive, and hand-copied. So reading before bed was not an option for the average peasant. Neither was writing, or even much conversation, once the sun went down. So evenings were short. Meals were taken early, often in the fading light. Afterward, families might sit together for a short while, sharing stories, warming hands by the fire. Children might drift off in laps or on the floor. Adults followed not long after. There was no shame in early sleep. In fact, it was the norm. People retired soon after dark and rose with the dawn. Their days followed the sun not because they chose to, but because it was the only clock they had. Bells might ring from the village church, marking certain hours. But in the countryside, away from towns and monasteries, people lived by light. When it faded, so did the day. This alignment with natural light, with the solar cycle, made for a sleep pattern that was both simple and effective. In winter, the nights were long, and so was sleep. In summer, nights were shorter, but often supplemented with daytime naps, brief rests taken after midday meals or during periods of heat. Rest was flexible. It was respected. And in the middle of the night, that gentle period between first and second sleep returned. It was never rushed. There was no anxiety about lying awake. No internal clock ticking away the minutes. It was a time for thought, for stillness, for listening to the world breathe. And when the body was ready, it slept again. Sleep, in the medieval world, was an act of surrender. Not a performance, not a metric to track. It was a return to stillness, to rhythm, to the embrace of dark and warmth. It was not always easy. Beds were rough, and winters cold. But it was honest sleep, untouched by the restless striving of modernity. Even dreams were seen differently. They were not analyzed or interpreted in the same way. They were often taken as signs, messages, omens. But also, they were accepted as part of life. Not something to control or engineer. Just a landscape the mind wandered through while the body rested. And as you lie here now, in a quieter room than usual, perhaps with your phone set aside and the lights dimmed, you might imagine the sounds of a medieval night. The crackle of the fire, the creak of timber, the soft breath of animals nearby, The weight of blankets, heavier than you're used to, and the slow, unbothered drift into sleep, just as it was for the peasants. There is no rush. The world will turn. The sun will rise. And for now, you can simply let go. Let the body sink. Let the thoughts loosen. Let your breath fall into that same rhythm followed for centuries by those who worked the land and rested in its shadow. The medieval peasant, though worn by the day, knew this kind of rest. And so, perhaps, do you now? Not because your bed is made of straw or your house of wattle and daub, but because sleep, true sleep, does not ask for perfection. It asks only for stillness and surrender. So rest, drift, let the night carry you. As the days folded into each other, season after season, the medieval peasant came to understand the night not as a pause in activity, but as a living part of the day itself. Sleep was not a barrier between the hours of work. It was a landscape of its own, where the world grew softer, quieter, and slower. Time passed differently in the dark. Less linear, less urgent. It unfolded like a slow tide, like the gentle wind through the thatched roofs. In many villages, there were no clocks ticking on the wall, no electric lights to resist the pull of dusk. When the sun began to set, the entire community dimmed with it. The marketplace emptied. The chatter slowed. Hearths were lit. Candles, only used when truly needed, cast small golden circles in otherwise dark rooms. The night belonged to stillness. For the peasant, sleep often began while the embers still glowed in the fireplace. There were no screens to scroll, no broadcasts to catch up on, no alarms to worry about. The only sound might be the distant lowing of cattle, the occasional bark of a dog, or the soft rustle of wind against wooden walls. These weren't interruptions, they were background music to the peace that sleep required. They didn't call it insomnia. They didn't need to. Waking in the middle of the night wasn't a problem to solve. It was a natural part of sleep. They called it watch, or perhaps no name at all. It was just the time between the two sleeps, when one might stir, sit quietly, maybe add a log to the fire. Some would use that time to whisper prayers, to reflect, to think. Others might check on animals, nurse a child, or simply gaze into the flames. No anxiety, no frustration, just a quiet intermission. The first sleep was deep and dreamless for many. The kind of sleep that came after a long day of harvesting, digging, sowing, or mending. Bodies surrendered to rest fully, because they had no choice. Sleep was not elusive when the limbs were sore and the back ached from honest labor. And in the stillness of these early hours, the world outside the peasant's home softened into silence. After the first sleep, the body would naturally rise. Not for long. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. But in this middle time, there was a gentle quiet that modern life rarely knows. No buzzing phones. No urgency. Just darkness and the soft crackle of burning logs. The pause allowed the mind to drift gently through thought. Not hurried, not stressed. Just drifting. And when the second sleep began, it was equally restful. Perhaps more so, as the body settled once again into the bedding, a mattress of straw, a woolen blanket, a thick cloak, sleep returned like an old friend. Not forced, not chased, simply welcomed. Morning light didn't arrive with noise. It crept slowly into the home through small windows or gaps in the wooden boards. It was a signal, not a shock. The body stirred naturally with the light, not with a jarring alarm. Roosters might call. The animals would move, and the house would slowly, sleepily come to life again. There was no rush in those first minutes. A simple meal, perhaps porridge or bread. Children rubbing their eyes. Adults stretching, shaking off the night. And despite the cold or damp, there was a sense of calm in that waking. They had rested. Not for 6 hours. Not in fragmented pieces. But in a long, natural rhythm. First sleep, middle wake, second sleep, that gave the body what it needed. We think of sleep today as something that must be managed, scheduled, perfected. But medieval peasants didn't manage sleep. They allowed it. They made space for it, not through gadgets or routines, but by simply being aligned with nature. The light, the dark, the seasons, the rhythms of the body. And this rhythm changed with the months. In winter, when days were short and nights long, sleep was abundant. The darkness demanded it. People might go to bed soon after sunset, and not rise until many hours later. The night stretched on like a blanket. And while the cold made sleep harder, the layered wool and shared warmth of family and fire made it possible. In summer, when the sun lingered longer in the sky, bedtimes came later. But rest still mattered. People rose early to make use of the cool morning hours. And sometimes, in the heat of midday, they would nap. Under a tree. In a barn. Even beside a field. A moment stolen from the day for the sake of the body. Peasants did not have a sleep schedule written down. They did not wear watches. They followed the world around them. The turn of the sun, the feel of the air, the sound of the village. And their sleep, as a result, was fluid, flexible, and strangely forgiving. Because they lacked artificial light, they didn't fight the dark. Darkness wasn't the enemy. It was a partner. It signaled when to stop, when to let go. And that surrender, night after night, became not just a habit, but a source of resilience. Even their food and drink supported rest. Their evening meals were usually simple: stew, bread, maybe some ale. No caffeine. No sugar-laden desserts. The kind of meal that satisfies but doesn't stimulate. And this, too, helped the body ease into rest. They did not write down their dreams. They did not need dream journals or sleep apps. They slept because their lives made sleep necessary. Their minds weren't crowded with notifications or endless thoughts. Their problems were real, but finite. Worry didn't spiral. It waited until morning. And so their sleep remained sacred. Not because they called it that, but because they honored it. Every day ended in rest. Not perfect. Not luxurious. But real. And that, more than anything else, gave them peace. Tonight, perhaps you can borrow a little of that rhythm. Set aside the expectation to sleep perfectly. Let the pressure ease. Let the body sink. Let your breath grow slower. You don't need to control sleep. You only need to make space for it. Like the peasant beside the fire. Like the child curled beside a parent. Like the dog by the door. Safe. Still. Ready to rest. And if you wake in the night, it's okay. It's not failure. It's just the space between the sleeps. Let your thoughts wander gently, like smoke from the fire. Let the dark hold you. There's no hurry. The world is still turning, and morning is still far off. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are simply resting, like so many before you. Like the peasants, whose lives were hard, but whose nights were whole. Sleep will return. It always does. As it did then. As it will now. Just let yourself be still. Sleep in the medieval world did not just belong to the body. It belonged to the land, too. To the rhythms of the soil, the breath of the wind, the shifting of seasons, and the sounds that filled a village at night. Every evening, the countryside prepared itself for rest, not with urgency, but with quiet acceptance. And so did the people who lived there. In the fields, as twilight crept along the furrows, tools were laid down slowly, without ceremony. The last echoes of labor faded into the earth. The creak of a wheelbarrow, the soft grunt of a donkey, the sigh of a tired man pulling off his boots. These were not loud exits from the day, but gentle farewells, given freely to the night. Houses in a medieval village did not stand alone in silence. They were part of a larger living organism, a community that shared not only work, but rest. One family's hearth smoke joined another's. One house's laughter or prayer or lullaby blended into the next. And so when sleep came, it didn't just settle over one roof. It drifted across the entire village like a mist. Inside those cottages, often simple, often small, sleep found a home among hay-stuffed mattresses and thick blankets of homespun wool. These beds were not luxury, but they were enough. They were warm when the nights were cold, and dry even when the thatch above leaked a little. More importantly, they were familiar. The same straw, the same scent of wood and smoke and old cloth, the same soft breathing of a spouse, a child, a grandparent nearby, sometimes even a neighbor, if the need arose. Privacy was rare, but comfort was not. There was something deeply reassuring in the sameness of it all. The way sleep followed the same path each night. Not perfect, not exact, but steady, a routine not imposed, but felt. No to-do lists to clear before bed. No glare from a screen. No rituals of optimization. Just the slow surrender into softness, once the sun had finally bowed below the edge of the world. And then, darkness. True darkness. Not the filtered dim of electric bulbs or street lamps, but complete, enveloping night. The kind of darkness that silenced the eyes and awakened the other senses. You could hear your own breath. Feel the warmth of the fire's last glow. Smell the earth and old wood and wool. It wasn't frightening. It was whole. It was ancient. The medieval night did not rush. It stretched, slowly, calmly. Dreams came in their own time, and in the hours after the first sleep, when the mind stirred and the body shifted, there was no panic. No worry that something was wrong. In fact, this was a moment many welcomed. A quiet watchfulness, a chance to reflect, to breathe, to simply be. Often, people would pray during this interlude, not out of duty, but peace. The kind of prayer that has no beginning or end. Just words rising softly in the dark. Sometimes couples would talk, quietly, intimately, sharing thoughts they hadn't voiced during the bustle of the day. It was said that conception often happened during this middle wake, when the world outside was silent and the mind was open. These were hours of slowness and connection, not wasted time, but time outside of time. Not every night, not every person, but often enough to be remembered. And then the second sleep would come, not as a chore but as a return. A gentle pulling back into rest, like slipping into a river. The mind would drift again. The limbs would grow heavy, and the night, so long and dark, would cradle them back into dreams. No one called it broken sleep. It was just sleep. Natural, complete, and old. When dawn came, it did not snap the world awake. There was no sudden brightness, no blaring alarms. The sun returned slowly, like it always had. Light filtered in through cracks in the wood. The air shifted. The animals stirred. People awoke because the world awoke, and they belonged to it. The rooster might crow. The cows might moo. But it wasn't noise. It was rhythm. The kind of sound the body expected. A call, not a jolt. They didn't drink coffee to shake off sleep. Their energy came gradually, from movement, from food, from the chill of morning air and the warmth of fire and kin. And they didn't curse the day. Because it was the day, and it had come again, just like always. But before all of that, they had slept. Deeply, gently, in a way that healed. It is tempting to believe that sleep today must be smarter, better, more refined. But perhaps it has only become more complicated. There are so many rules now, so many tricks, so many products. And still, rest feels just out of reach for many. But in the villages and farms of the past, sleep was not a product. It was part of the world. Not separate from the day, but the soft conclusion to it. Not something to hack, but something to hold. It was woven into everything. The way the sun moved, the way the animals behaved, the way food was eaten and fires were tended. Even the way stories were told. Children fell asleep to old tales repeated night after night. Folklore and memory mixed together in the glow of the hearth. Those stories didn't need endings. They were just voices in the dark, gently carrying the young into dreams. And if they woke, it was all right. Sleep would come again. It always did. The body, tired from walking or digging or sewing, did not resist rest. And the mind, unburdened by the digital noise of our time, did not race. It wandered, yes, but it wandered slowly, through memories, through prayers, through the rustling of leaves or the shifting of wind. Night was not a failure of the day. It was the reward. And sleep, for the medieval peasant, was not always easy, but it was deep. It was earned. It was shared. Perhaps you're listening now with tired eyes. Perhaps the day has been long. Let the quiet of the past settle in around you. There is nothing to do. Nothing to fix. No perfect moment to chase. Just rest, as they did, gently, slowly, and without fear of the dark. This night is yours. And sleep, when it comes, will be enough. The quiet rhythms of peasant life didn't end with the day. They gently echoed into the night, like ripples on still water. For those who lived in the slow and steady turn of medieval time, sleep was never something that had to be squeezed into a busy schedule or earned through exhaustion. It was as natural as breath, as inevitable as dusk, and as close to them as the soil beneath their feet. As twilight fell over the village, and the last traces of golden light slipped through the trees, a soft hush settled into the world. There was no electricity to cut through the darkness. No neon hum, no televisions left on in the background, no glowing phones demanding one last scroll before rest. The absence of these modern interruptions gave the night a certain weight, a fullness. Darkness itself became a presence, not a void. It wrapped around homes like a heavy, woolen cloak, thick, quiet, complete. Inside the cottages, the end of the day unfolded gently. The fire, which had crackled cheerfully during supper, would dim to warm embers. The light it cast was not harsh or white, but golden and flickering, the kind of light that invites stillness, that softens the edges of the world. Shadows would dance across walls made of timber and wattle, casting long silhouettes that lulled the eye rather than startling it. People spoke in low tones, if at all. Conversations slowed, and eventually, they stopped altogether. There was no need for loud goodnights. Everyone knew what time it was. The body felt it before the mind did. And in this stillness, they lay down, not into designer mattresses or memory foam, but onto straw-stuffed sacks or blankets piled over wooden slats. These beds were simple, but not cruel. They were rough, yes, but not uncomfortable in the way we might imagine. Because sleep, back then, was more about surrender than precision. It wasn't optimized, it was embraced. They lay with the smell of hearth smoke in their hair, with the feel of worn linen against skin, with the faint crackle of coals and the rustling of animals outside, chickens shifting in their roosts, a dog stirring and then settling again. All these small, familiar sounds formed a kind of lullaby. Nothing jarring, just life, breathing alongside them. And they weren't alone. Families often slept together in the same room, and sometimes even the same bed. There was no stigma to this closeness. In fact, it was comforting. Children nestled against parents. Siblings shared warmth under heavy woolen covers. In winter, the heat of another body was a necessity, not a luxury. And this closeness bred something we often forget, a sense of shared rest. That sleep was not just an individual escape, but a communal retreat. The whole household slowing, together, into slumber. Outside, the world kept its own pace. The moon moved silently through the sky. Owls called out into the darkness, their voices rising and falling like wind through leaves. If someone woke in the night, there was no clock to check. No digital numbers glowing on a bedside table. Time wasn't something to measure. It was something to feel. And in this timelessness, people often drifted naturally in and out of consciousness. This was the time between first and second sleep, a forgotten rhythm in our modern world, but a deeply human one. In this quiet space, perhaps a candle would be lit, just for a moment. A brief stretch, a trip outside to relieve oneself, a soft word shared in the darkness. Some would pray, others would sit silently, listening to the world. And then, after a little while, they would return to bed and fall back into the second wave of sleep, just as natural, just as complete as the first. These patterns weren't dictated by alarms or schedules. They were shaped by stars and seasons, by the harvest and the hearth, by days filled with honest work and nights filled with honest rest. People didn't chase sleep, they let it arrive. And when it did, it stayed. Even their dreams were different. Perhaps, not fractured by blue light or overstimulation, but steeped in the slow pace of daily life. Images of the fields, of animals, of loved ones. Simple, quiet dreams. Sometimes strange, sometimes vivid, but rarely frantic. Rarely the kind of dreams that leave you more tired than before. And when they woke, they didn't leap out of bed. There was no snooze button, no blaring ringtone. Just a slow stirring, the body stretching back into itself. The world brightening gently through gaps in wooden shutters. A rooster's crow, not as an alarm, but as a greeting. The first clatter of a pail. The hiss of water heating over fire. A new day, arriving like a yawn. What's important to remember is that these people, though poor by our standards, did not lack rest. Their lives were not easy, far from it. The work was hard. The winters were cold. Illness was common. But when they slept, they did so without the modern layers of tension we carry. They were not buried beneath emails, or news alerts, or endless comparisons. They were tired, and they slept. There was a purity in that. A simplicity. And in this simplicity, something beautiful emerged. A connection between the natural world and the sleeping body. The sun and the sleep cycle moved in tandem. The dark did not frighten, it healed. And rest, rather than being squeezed in between activities, was built into the structure of life itself. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, a light rain would begin to fall. It would tap gently against the roof, not a noise to disturb sleep, but to deepen it. That rhythm, soft and steady, would blend with dreams, creating a cocoon of sound and sensation. Safe, familiar, timeless. And if someone woke, perhaps to stoke the fire or check on a child, they would do so quietly. Not because they were afraid of waking others, but because the night itself seemed to demand gentleness. There was a reverence for sleep, not spoken, but understood. So here we are, centuries later, chasing rest with apps and supplements and endless advice. Trying to reconstruct what our ancestors had without even knowing they had it. But perhaps the answer isn't more tools, more routines, more strategies. Perhaps it's less. Less noise, less light, less rush, and more slowness, more surrender, more trust in the body's ancient knowledge. You don't need to live in a thatched cottage to sleep like a medieval peasant, but you can borrow from their world, from their rhythms, from the way they let the day end and the night begin without resistance. You can dim the lights, silence the phone, breathe deeply, and remember that sleep is not something to earn. It's something to receive. And as you lie there now, maybe under a soft blanket, maybe with the hum of the night around you, know that rest is close. Closer than you think. Not out there, waiting to be captured, but already within you. Waiting only for the world to grow quiet enough to hear it. Let your thoughts drift, slowly. Let your body sink. You are not alone in this night. Generations before you have rested in darkness. Let their rhythm guide you. Sleep, like the earth, like the seasons, will return. It always does. Sleep came easily to those who rose with the sun and lay down with the stars. For the medieval peasant, the rhythm of life was carved not by urgency, but by the pace of nature. And it's in this slow-moving current of time that the secret to their restful nights lies. Not in luxury, not in control, but in surrender. Imagine, for a moment, the absence of pressure. No deadlines looming over your head. No morning meetings. No inbox brimming with unread messages. Just the familiar cadence of another day's work behind you, and the comforting knowledge that tomorrow would come at its own pace, just as today had done. There was nothing to chase. The day ended when the light faded, and the night began not with fanfare, but with stillness. As the last orange glow faded from the horizon, homes turned inward. There was no fanfare, no evening news, no glowing rectangles demanding attention. Only the slow dying of the light, and the invitation to let go. In those early hours of the night, the outside world disappeared, replaced by the intimate sounds of the hearth. The hiss of cooling stones, the soft creak of wood as it settled, the breath of livestock gently shifting in their stalls just outside the walls. These were the lullabies of the medieval world. Families huddled close, not just for warmth but for companionship. With shared beds or shared floor space, sleep wasn't solitary, it was communal. And within that closeness, there was comfort. Children nestled against the familiar shapes of parents. Elderly family members dozed quietly nearby, their dreams colored by long memories. There was something reassuring about sleeping with the gentle breathing of others in earshot. A rhythm that reminded you, even in dreams, that you were not alone. The air inside these cottages was rich with the scent of life. Not sanitized or perfumed, but textured, a mix of smoke, wool, bread crusts, and damp earth. The scent of lived-in space. There were no fans to hum away the silence. No hum of refrigerators. No distant traffic. Just the soft sounds of existence itself. The gentle exhale of the land, the people, and the night. What's striking about medieval sleep, and what modern minds so often miss, is that it wasn't something to conquer. It was something to yield to. No melatonin gummies. No podcasts to soothe an overstimulated brain. Sleep didn't need help. It simply arrived, unhurried and assured. A biological tide that no one tried to resist. And so they rested. First sleep, as they called it, would begin not long after darkness fell. It came easily. The body, tired from labor and the mind quieted by lack of stimulation, would sink effortlessly into slumber. It was a full, deep sleep, often lasting 4 or 5 hours. And when it lifted, in the middle of the night, it wasn't a cause for anxiety. Waking wasn't a failure, it was expected. In that liminal space between first and second sleep, there was time to simply be. Some would pray quietly, speaking to a God they felt closer to in the hush of night. Others would reflect, speak softly to a bedmate, or rise briefly to tend to small tasks. It was not the wakefulness of insomnia, but a gentle interlude. A pause in the concert of the night. And then, as easily as it came, the second sleep would arrive. Not forced, not summoned, simply allowed. The body, untroubled by fear or stress, drifted again into rest. And by the time the sky began to pale with the earliest signs of dawn, sleep would lift naturally, like fog dissolving in the morning light. There's something deeply human in this rhythm. Something ancient. Before we shaped our schedules with clocks and deadlines, we were creatures of the sun and moon. And in the medieval world, the boundaries between these forces, work and rest, waking and dreaming, were softer, more fluid. And perhaps it's that softness that we've lost. We often imagine the past as hard, and certainly, for medieval peasants, life was not without suffering. But the difficulty of their days often gave way to the simplicity of their nights. They did not fight rest. They did not overthink it. They did not scroll through thoughts and screens, trying to find peace. Peace, for them, was the absence of noise. And in that silence, the mind, like the body, found its rhythm. Even the way they used space encouraged rest. Beds were tucked into corners, away from drafts. Heavy wool and furs offered warmth without electricity. And in summer, windows opened to let in the sound of crickets, frogs, and the rustle of wind through trees. Nature wasn't an intrusion. It was a part of life. A part of sleep. There were no bedtime routines as we think of them. But there were habits, simple ones. A last trip outside to the privy. A closing of shutters. A mumbled prayer. A careful banking of the fire. These rituals, repeated each night, anchored the body. They signaled to the mind that the day had ended, and that it was safe to rest. They didn't require apps or guides. Just presence. And when the fire was low, and the room glowed faintly with its last orange traces, they lay down. The room, now quiet and dim, became a world unto itself. A cave of comfort. A place to drift. Think of that now, as you listen. A place not far from the present, but deeply removed from noise. A world of rhythm, not pressure. A life that didn't sprint toward the next thing, but moved in gentle, steady cycles. In that world, sleep came not as an escape, but as a return. A reunion with the body's oldest need. Perhaps, as you lie in bed now, you can feel a whisper of that rhythm. The weight of your blanket, the breath moving slowly in and out of your chest, the sound of your environment beginning to blur at the edges. Let yourself soften. Let your thoughts untangle, like thread in warm water. There is nothing more you need to do tonight. Nothing to plan, or fix, or check. Like the peasants who came before you, you are safe in this moment. You are enough in your stillness. And if you wake in the middle of the night, don't worry. That, too, is ancient. That, too, is part of the rhythm. Just as they did, centuries ago, you can rest again. You can return to the quiet waters of second sleep, knowing that morning will come in its own time. Sleep, once again, is not something to chase. It is already here, waiting only for your permission to begin. There is a quiet magic in the ordinary lives of medieval peasants, especially when we consider something as simple as sleep. It's easy to overlook how deeply their world was shaped by the cycles of nature, how their rest was woven seamlessly into the fabric of the day and night. Their sleep was not a separate battle to be won or a prize to be earned. It was a natural chapter in the endless story of life. Picture, if you will, the absence of modern distractions. No buzzing phones. No streetlights piercing the dark. No background noise from the hum of city life. Just the slow fading of the sun, the gentle chorus of crickets, and the distant hoot of an owl. In the quiet of the medieval countryside, sound itself became a balm. The soft patter of rain on thatch roofs, the rustling of leaves, and the far-off bleating of sheep created a soundtrack that invited the body to relax. It's a world where silence is not empty but full of gentle life, where the mind is freed from the endless chatter of modernity. Because they lived so close to the land, peasants knew the seasons intimately. Spring meant planting, summer, tending, autumn, harvest, and winter, rest. This deep connection influenced how they rested each night. During the long, cold months, the earth itself seemed to slow, and so did they. The nights were longer, colder, and darker, but this darkness was not to be feared. It was a signal to embrace rest, to save energy, to dream. It is said that in winter, some peasants would actually welcome the night as a time for storytelling, for quiet reflection by the fire. Their sleep may have been longer, but it was intertwined with moments of gentle wakefulness, with time to think, share, and simply be. This cyclical pattern of sleep, waking and dozing, was not a sign of restlessness but a natural rhythm, much like the tides of the sea. Think about how different this is from our world. Today, we fight sleep. We see waking at night as a problem to be solved, not a natural phase to be accepted. But for medieval peasants, this waking was woven into the night's fabric. They might rise, quietly move about, tend the fire, or whisper a prayer, before returning to a second deep sleep. There was no pressure to fix these hours of wakefulness, only an understanding that the night had many layers. This cyclical rest, interrupted yet peaceful, may explain why their sleep was considered so deep and restorative. The body wasn't forced into a rigid 8-hour block. It was allowed to flow naturally through different phases, guided by instinct and nature rather than the clock. We often assume that technology has improved every aspect of life, but when it comes to sleep, medieval peasants had something precious that we struggle to reclaim: freedom from artificial light. The flicker of candlelight or firelight was soft, warm, and limited, never competing with the harsh glare of screens or bulbs. Their nights were truly dark, allowing melatonin, the body's sleep hormone, to rise naturally. And this natural darkness was crucial. Melatonin is sensitive to light, and its rise signals to the body that it is time to rest. Without artificial lights confusing the signals, peasants' bodies knew exactly when to prepare for sleep. Their internal clocks, their circadian rhythms, could run true, unbroken by blue light or late-night distractions. There is also something to be said about the physical exhaustion of a day's labor. Unlike many today, whose work often involves sitting or staring at screens, peasants spent their days moving, digging, planting, harvesting, and tending animals. Their bodies were tired in a deeply physical way, muscles worn from use, limbs ready to stretch out and relax fully. And with that deep physical tiredness came an equally deep sleep. Not restless, anxious, or fractured, but full and renewing. This kind of rest allowed them to wake refreshed, ready to greet the dawn and its tasks again. It's important, too, to consider the simplicity of their sleeping environments. Beds were often simple straw-filled mattresses or wooden pallets covered with woolen blankets. These were not the plush, temperature-controlled spaces we expect today, but they had their own comfort, a connection to the earth, natural materials, and a lack of overstimulation. The coolness of the night air might seem uncomfortable to us now, but in moderation, it actually encourages better sleep. Cooler temperatures help the body lower its core temperature, which is necessary for falling and staying asleep. The peasants' homes, while humble, were well adapted to this rhythm. They were warm enough to be safe and comfortable, but not so warm as to disrupt sleep cycles. And the absence of noise pollution cannot be overstated. Modern environments are noisy. Cars, planes, appliances, even neighbors can create a constant backdrop of sound that interrupts deep rest. Medieval peasants, by contrast, rested in a natural soundscape that the human brain can process as calming. As you listen to this now, you might begin to feel your own breathing slow, your body sink deeper into relaxation. Imagine yourself in one of those simple medieval cottages. Feel the gentle weight of the wool blanket. Hear the soft crackle of the dying fire. Smell the earth, the wood smoke, the scent of bread cooling on the windowsill. In this moment, you're joining a long line of sleepers who trusted their bodies to the natural night. No screens, no alarms, no interruptions. Just the steady, timeless rhythm of rest. You don't have to try. You don't have to chase sleep. It is already with you. Like the medieval peasants, you can surrender to it. Feel the quiet settling over you like a gentle cloak. Allow your thoughts to drift as freely as clouds on a slow summer breeze. Let the world outside your window become a distant murmur. Sleep is waiting, just as it has for centuries. And when you wake, it will be with the slow grace of dawn, unhurried and gentle. For now, rest. Imagine for a moment the night sky stretching endlessly above the medieval village. No light pollution dulling the stars, no skyscrapers blocking the view, just a pure, vast canvas of twinkling lights, silently watching over the peasants as they drift into sleep. The universe seemed closer back then, almost part of their nightly ritual. Sleep wasn't just about rest. It was a quiet communion with the world around them. The peasant's life was humble, yes, but it was deeply tied to the earth and the heavens, both of which guided their sleep patterns. When the sun dipped below the horizon, it wasn't merely the end of the day. It was a signal to their bodies that it was time to slow down and prepare for rest. Their internal clocks were attuned not to digital schedules or artificial lighting, but to the natural rhythms of light and dark. This profound connection to the cycles of day and night ensured their sleep was synchronized with nature's own pulse. They rose with the dawn's first light and rested when the stars took their place. This balance created a sleep pattern that was consistent and restorative. It's something we often miss today when our nights are disrupted by glowing screens and endless to-do lists. In their modest homes, the atmosphere for sleep was simple but effective. The straw mattresses, sometimes layered with feathers or wool, provided enough comfort for restful sleep without excess. Unlike the plush beds of nobility, these humble arrangements connected peasants directly to the natural materials surrounding them, keeping them grounded, literally and figuratively. Another element that shaped their sleep was the absence of modern stresses. Their worries were immediate and physical. Will the harvest succeed? Is the roof sturdy enough for winter? But these concerns, though real, were part of a daily cycle that offered resolution with each new sunrise. This cyclical nature meant there was a clear end to the day's troubles, allowing the mind to relax more completely at night. Modern life, with its relentless pace and invisible pressures, can keep our minds racing long after our bodies are ready for rest. Medieval peasants, by contrast, were able to leave their worries outside the door. When night fell, it was understood. Time to rest, time to recharge. Community also played a subtle but powerful role. In medieval villages, people often slept close together, sometimes in shared rooms or communal spaces. This proximity provided a sense of safety and warmth, reducing anxiety and promoting deeper sleep. The simple presence of others, breathing softly in the dark, created a cocoon of comfort. In today's isolated world, many sleep alone and sometimes feel the quiet night is lonely or unsettling. But for medieval peasants, the night was a shared experience. This communal sleep environment helped regulate breathing and heart rates through subtle, unconscious synchronization with others. It's a fascinating, almost forgotten part of their restful lives. Food, too, influenced their sleep. Their diets were simple and seasonal, mostly consisting of grains, vegetables, and occasional protein. Heavy meals late at night were rare, and many peasants ate their main meal midday, allowing their bodies to digest fully before bedtime. This careful timing prevented the discomfort and restlessness that often plague modern sleepers who snack late or indulge in processed foods. Additionally, herbal remedies were sometimes used to soothe the mind and body. Chamomile, lavender, and valerian root were common plants known for their calming effects. Though not everyone had access to such remedies, those who did found natural ways to ease into sleep without synthetic chemicals or pills. Their daily exposure to sunlight also played a critical role. Sunlight is essential for regulating melatonin production, the hormone responsible for signaling our bodies to sleep. Peasants spent most of their days outdoors, absorbing the sun's rays, which helped strengthen their internal clocks. This natural exposure set the stage for a night of deep, uninterrupted rest. Contrast this with the modern tendency to stay indoors under artificial light, which often confuses the body's natural cues. The result? Sleepless nights and groggy mornings. The peasants' outdoor lives provided a natural remedy that modern science continues to validate today. As the cold months arrived, their bodies adapted gracefully to the changing environment. They would layer blankets or huddle closer together, but they never over-insulated their sleeping spaces. The slight chill in the air encouraged the body's natural drop in temperature, an essential step in falling asleep. Our modern tendency to crank up the heat can interfere with this process, making it harder to reach the deep, restorative phases of sleep. Their nights might have been punctuated by brief waking periods, but these moments were gentle and unhurried. Instead of reaching for devices or scrolling through endless feeds, a peasant might simply lie quietly, feeling the steady rhythm of their own breath, the comforting weight of blankets, or the soft sounds of the countryside outside. This unpressured relationship with wakefulness is another secret to their restful nights. They didn't fight these moments or judge them as failures. Instead, they embraced the ebb and flow of sleep and wake, allowing their bodies to rest as needed. One of the most beautiful aspects of their sleep experience was the lack of artificial boundaries. Bedtime wasn't a strict, enforced hour but a natural shift dictated by fatigue and darkness. This freedom allowed for more flexible and intuitive rest, honoring the body's signals rather than external schedules. In thinking about medieval peasants and their sleep, it becomes clear that their restful nights were no accident. They were the result of living in harmony with nature's cycles, embracing simplicity, and nurturing a gentle relationship with their own bodies. As you listen now, allow yourself to imagine this peaceful world, free from the noise and rush of modern life. Picture the slow fading of twilight, the cool comfort of a straw mattress, the quiet breathing of neighbors nearby. Let your mind wander gently through the fields and forests, the village and the stars above. Feel your own breath steadying, your muscles softening, your heart slowing to a calm beat. Sleep is not a destination but a journey, one that the medieval peasants knew well. Rest now, as they did, in the quiet embrace of the night. As the night deepens over the medieval village, the world outside grows quieter, and the rhythm of life slows to a gentle pulse. For the peasants, sleep was a natural part of this cycle, woven seamlessly into their existence. They did not rush or resist the night. Instead, they surrendered to it, like the earth itself falling asleep beneath a blanket of stars. This surrender was not simply a matter of physical exhaustion but a deep, ingrained understanding of rest as a vital rhythm of life. The peasant's day was punctuated by labor, meals, prayers, and social moments, but as darkness grew, so did their readiness for repose. Their bodies were trained by necessity and habit to honor this transition with grace. Their homes, humble as they were, played a significant role in fostering this transition. Unlike our modern houses, often filled with electric lights, buzzing devices, and complex heating systems, medieval cottages were simple and quiet. The only light at night came from flickering candles or a dying hearth fire, casting soft, dancing shadows that soothed rather than stimulated the mind. In these dim surroundings, the eyes and brain were gently coaxed into a state of relaxation, unlike the harsh glare of modern screens that flood our brains with artificial daylight. The peasant's evening routine was slow and predictable, tending to chores, washing up by the light of a candle, saying a prayer or telling a story, then climbing into bed when the body said it was time. There was no pressure to fall asleep quickly or to meet a fixed bedtime. This absence of stress around sleep itself was a blessing. Modern studies show that anxiety about not sleeping often worsens insomnia, creating a vicious cycle. The peasants, with their simpler expectations, rarely suffered from this kind of sleep anxiety. Their connection to the land also meant that their sleep was a direct reflection of the seasons. Summer nights were short but warm, inviting a different sleep rhythm than the long, cold nights of winter. During winter, villagers might share beds or rooms, huddling for warmth, and resting more deeply due to the longer hours of darkness. This natural variation is something modern society often ignores, with climate control and artificial lighting creating a constant spring environment year-round. By ignoring these seasonal shifts, we disrupt our innate sleep patterns and lose touch with the deeper cycles that our bodies evolved to follow. Furthermore, the peasants' limited exposure to nighttime noise contributed to their deep rest. The village was alive with sounds during the day, animal calls, footsteps, voices, but as night fell, these sounds faded. The countryside returned to a natural quiet, punctuated only by the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of wind through the trees. This natural silence encouraged the brain to downshift, helping to calm the mind and prepare it for sleep. Contrast that with the modern world, where city noise, car horns, sirens, and even indoor appliances can prevent the brain from fully relaxing, leading to lighter, less restorative sleep. Even the very architecture of their homes promoted restful sleep. Thick walls of stone or wood insulated from harsh winds and helped maintain a steady, cool temperature, ideal for sleeping. Unlike modern homes that can become overheated or overly air-conditioned, medieval cottages stayed closer to the natural outdoor climate. Temperature plays a crucial role in sleep quality. Our bodies need to cool down to initiate deep sleep cycles, and the peasants' homes allowed this natural cooling process to happen. The small hearth fire provided warmth without overheating the space, and blankets made from wool or animal hides offered comfort and insulation. Food and drink were another important part of the pre-sleep ritual. Peasants typically ate light evening meals, often simple soups or porridges, which were easy to digest and did not interfere with sleep. Heavy or spicy foods, which can disrupt rest, were generally reserved for daytime meals. In addition, the use of herbal teas or infusions from calming plants like chamomile or mint was common. These natural remedies gently encouraged relaxation without the side effects of modern pharmaceuticals. The peasants' relationship with these plants was intimate, passed down through generations, and used not only for sleep but for many health concerns. The spiritual beliefs of the time also influenced sleep. Many peasants held the view that the night was a sacred time, a moment for reflection and connection with the divine. Night prayers or simple meditations before bed helped ease the mind and provided comfort against fears of the dark or bad dreams. In this way, sleep was not just a physical necessity but a holistic experience involving body, mind, and spirit. This integrated approach is something modern science is only beginning to understand as it studies the benefits of mindfulness and relaxation techniques on sleep. The medieval peasants' lives were tough, full of hard work and uncertainty, yet their sleep was often better than ours today. Their bodies and minds were aligned with natural rhythms, their environments quiet and simple, their routines consistent and calming. As you listen to these words now, imagine yourself lying in a rustic wooden bed, wrapped in a woolen blanket. Outside, the night is cool and still, the only sounds those of nature's gentle breath. Your eyes grow heavy, your body softens, and your mind lets go of the day's worries. Feel the steady rise and fall of your breath, the calm settling over your thoughts. There is nowhere else to be, nothing else to do but rest, as the medieval peasants did so many centuries ago. Sleep is coming, quietly and surely, carrying you gently into its peaceful embrace. In the quiet heart of the medieval countryside, time moved not by the ticking of clocks but by the slow and deliberate pace of the sun and moon. For the peasant, each day folded into the next with a comforting sameness. There was a rhythm, an order, that gave life shape and sleep its rightful place. They did not need alarms to wake them or pills to put them to bed. Their bodies simply knew. As the stars came out and the fire burned low, the day gently gave way to night. And in that slow descent into slumber, there was comfort. The kind of comfort that comes not from luxury, but from certainty. The certainty that tomorrow, while full of labor, would follow a familiar path. The same chickens would need feeding. The same tools would be gathered. The same sun would rise. It wasn't excitement that brought them peace, but repetition, predictability, stability. As modern people, we often underestimate how important that stability is for our ability to rest. Our lives are full of surprises, notifications, shifting schedules, late-night emails. But the medieval peasant knew none of that. Their world, though small, was reliable. And that reliability made space in the mind for rest. Their dreams, when they came, were often shaped by their days, weather, harvests, songs, and stories. No flashing screens. No streaming videos. No dramatic cliffhanger to process before bed. Just the lingering smell of smoke from the hearth, the feel of straw beneath a blanket, the sound of a nearby cow shuffling in the dark. Sleep, for them, was not something they optimized. It was not a task or a goal. It was part of being human, as natural as eating or breathing. And it came, night after night, because the body asked and the world answered. The environment helped, too. Their cottages, simple and sparse, were dark. Not the kind of darkness that a flimsy curtain offers, but true darkness. The kind only broken by moonlight or a flickering candle. That darkness signaled the body's internal clock, called the circadian rhythm, to begin its slow wind down. Melatonin, the body's sleep hormone, rose as the fire fell. There were no bright bathroom lights or midnight texts to interrupt the process. Just gradual stillness. Even the materials around them encouraged rest. Beds, often made of rough wood, were piled with straw or hay and covered in wool. Not plush by modern standards, but functional, warm, and free of the pressure to be perfect. Peasants didn't lie awake wondering if they'd bought the wrong mattress. They simply lay down and allowed sleep to come. This physical relationship with the materials of nature, the smell of wool, the creak of timber, the crackle of embers, tied their rest to the earth. Each element was part of a cycle. The wool came from sheep they knew, the wood from forests they walked through, the straw from fields they'd helped to harvest. Nothing was distant or anonymous. Nothing was synthetic or mass-produced. This closeness gave a sense of grounding, of being held by the world rather than tossed about by it. That feeling of being grounded is one modern sleep researchers are beginning to rediscover. Weighted blankets, essential oils, and mindfulness apps all attempt to recreate a sense of comfort and connection. But the peasant lived it daily, without ever needing a therapist to explain it. They were part of the land, part of the season, part of a village. And so they slept, not just alone in their beds, but surrounded by meaning and place. Another reason their rest came so deeply was the absence of comparison. In today's world, sleep is often judged. We compare how many hours we got to others. We track sleep stages, worry about optimization. But the peasant didn't have a Fitbit. No one told them they were bad sleepers. Sleep was not a competition. It was something you did because night came, and because the body asked. This lack of performance anxiety may sound trivial, but it's significant. Many people today lie in bed worrying not just that they can't sleep, but that they are failing at sleep, that they're broken, that something is wrong. But the peasant, who might not even have known the word insomnia, simply accepted the occasional restless night without judgment. They got up, stirred the fire, maybe whispered a prayer, and went back to bed when tiredness returned. This idea, that waking during the night is not a crisis, is something even historians have studied. In fact, many believe that pre-industrial people, including medieval peasants, did not sleep in one long stretch, as we often try to do today. Instead, they had what's called segmented sleep. 2 shorter sleeps, with a period of wakefulness in between. During this watch, as it was sometimes called, peasants might pray, tend to livestock, or quietly talk with one another. They didn't panic. They didn't lie awake frustrated. They accepted it as part of the night's flow. In this way, their understanding of sleep was both more flexible and more forgiving. It wasn't about control. It was about listening, responding, adapting to what the body and the night offered. It's worth imagining what it would be like to return to such a mindset. To fall asleep not because we must, but because it's time. To wake in the dark and not fear it, but welcome it as a moment of calm. A moment to think, to breathe, to just be. And when sleep came again, it would come softly. No harsh alarms. No need to time it. Just the body, following its own rhythm, held by the silence of a sleeping village. Even the presence of others contributed to this peace. Most peasant families shared space. Children, siblings, even neighbors at times. There were no private bedrooms. But instead of being a source of stress, this togetherness offered comfort. The sound of a loved one's breath, the shared warmth under wool, the knowledge that you were not alone. All of this soothed the nervous system. Loneliness, so common in modern sleep struggles, was almost unknown in such settings. Today, many people fall asleep with TV voices just to fill the silence. But the peasant's silence was never empty. It was full of presence. Of animals shifting in nearby stalls. Of family rustling under blankets. Of the wind brushing against shutters. And so sleep came, not as an interruption, but as a return. A return to the earth. A return to oneself. A return to a rhythm that had held human beings long before electric lights and 9-to-5 jobs and caffeine-fueled mornings. As you settle deeper now, let your breath match the rhythm of that forgotten world. Slow, gentle, undemanding. There is no need to force anything. No need to worry about when you'll sleep or how. Just be here. In this story. In this quiet moment. Like a peasant resting after a long day in the fields, soothed by the fire's glow, wrapped in stillness. Let your thoughts drift like smoke. Let your body soften like straw beneath a woolen blanket. You are safe. You are still. You are enough. And sleep, as it did for them, will come, without effort, without pressure. Just a part of the night. A gift from the dark. Imagine, now, that the world outside your window has disappeared. No cars rushing by, no distant sirens, no hum of appliances or glow of digital clocks. Just the hush of a medieval village at rest. The sun has long since dipped beneath the horizon, and the last orange light has faded from the clouds. In the fields, the grasses have stilled, and the animals have gone quiet. All that remains is the soft creak of wood, the crackle of a dying fire, and the slow, rhythmic breath of people who know it is time to sleep. In this peaceful, uncomplicated place, time is marked not by seconds and minutes but by sensations. The feel of the day's work slowly leaving the body. The way the night air cools the skin. The way the stillness seems to thicken, wrapping gently around every cottage, barn, and field. Sleep, here, is not an escape. It is part of life's natural unfolding. A chapter in the daily rhythm that begins with the rooster's crow and ends with the hush of darkness. The medieval peasant's relationship with sleep was never transactional. They didn't bargain with it, didn't try to optimize it, didn't fear it. They simply allowed it to arrive when the time was right, much like the rain, or the harvest, or the blooming of the wildflowers in the hedgerows. This sense of surrender, to the body, to the moment, made sleep not just more accessible, but more sacred. Their bedtime rituals were simple, yet effective. There was no winding down with screens or scrolling through news feeds. Instead, it might be a few quiet words spoken in prayer, or the gentle tending of the last embers in the hearth. Perhaps a bit of bread shared, a small drink of ale or warm milk, a lullaby hummed by an elder. These acts were not distractions, but transitions. Bridges from waking to dreaming. And every night, these bridges were crossed with trust. One of the reasons their sleep was so deeply restorative is because it was in harmony with the seasons. Summer nights were short, and peasants often rose early with the dawn. But in winter, the long nights stretched luxuriously, allowing for ample rest. There were no harsh electric lights to override the natural cues. When the sun set early, and the cold settled in, it made sense to go to bed. To crawl under heavy woolen blankets and simply let the darkness do its work. And during those long winter nights, sleep came in waves. That old pattern again, segmented sleep, where people would rest for a few hours, wake gently in the middle of the night, then drift back into sleep again before morning. This waking time was not a disturbance. It was a pause, a breath in the middle of the night's symphony. Some might use it to pray, to think, or to talk softly with others in the room. There was no anxiety about being awake, just quiet acceptance. The middle of the night was not something to fight, but something to experience. This concept is so foreign to many people today. Modern life tells us that we must sleep in one perfect, unbroken stretch, or else something is wrong. But for medieval peasants, the two-part sleep was entirely normal, natural, even. And this way of sleeping, this cycle of rest and gentle wakefulness, may have given their bodies and minds more chances to reset, more opportunities to release the day, to process, to heal, to drift again into dreams. Their dreams, too, were simpler. Not because their minds were smaller, but because their inputs were fewer. They didn't fall asleep to the chatter of podcasts or the flash of TV shows. They didn't carry the mental load of constant updates, global news, and the pressure to always be productive. Their minds were full of the earth, of daily life, of rhythms they could understand. A dream might carry them through a field of barley, or back to a childhood memory, or into the soft fog that sometimes rolled over the village in the early morning. And when they woke, they didn't immediately reach for stimulation. There was no phone to check, no screen to light their faces, just the return of light, and the steady sense that the day was beginning again. The absence of artificial light was one of the great gifts of their world. Candlelight, firelight, moonlight, these were soft, warm, and fleeting. They did not disrupt sleep, but rather enhanced the transition toward it. In their cottages, the shadows danced gently on the walls, and the dimness signaled to the brain that it was time to wind down. Even the stars above, so visible without modern pollution, offered a sense of scale and perspective. You were small beneath the sky, and that smallness was not frightening, it was comforting. It meant that you could rest, that the world would turn, with or without your attention. And turn it did. The world of the peasant was governed by cycles, day and night, planting and harvest, feast and fast. These cycles created an internal clock that needed no reminders. No pop-up notifications. Just the deep, cellular memory that when the fields were bare and the air turned cold, it was time to rest more, to eat warm food, to stay closer to home. And when the buds appeared on the trees again, it was time to rise earlier, to move more, to work once again with the soil. This symbiosis with the earth was no accident. It was born of necessity, yes, but also of wisdom. The wisdom of generations who learned that pushing too hard against the seasons only brought pain. That rest was not laziness, but survival. That sleep was not a luxury, but a birthright. In our modern world, we often treat sleep as a reward, something we earn after a hard day. But the medieval peasant did not think of it that way. It was simply there, woven into the day like any other need. You didn't have to deserve it. You didn't have to prove anything. You just had to lie down, close your eyes, and let the darkness gather you. So now, in this moment, you might imagine yourself there. In a small, warm cottage, the fire dim and low, the air cool and clean. A heavy blanket covers you. You can hear the wind outside, but you're safe. The work of the day is behind you. The chores are done. The animals are quiet. The village is sleeping. And you, too, are ready. Ready to join the countless others across history who have found comfort in the dark. Who have trusted the night to do its work. Who have understood, without needing science or strategy, that sleep will come when it is welcomed. So welcome it now. Let your thoughts soften, your muscles release. Let your breath become slower, deeper, as though you are syncing with the rhythms of the past. You are not alone. You are not behind. You are simply here, in this story, drifting back through time to a world that slept not out of exhaustion, but out of rhythm. The world will keep turning. The stars will keep burning. And you, dear listener, have nothing left to do tonight but rest. Let go. Let go. Let sleep begin. The night has deepened. If you listen carefully, you might imagine the quiet of a medieval countryside stretching out in all directions. the distant echo of an owl calling across the fields, the creak of wood as the house settles in the cold, maybe a soft shuffle of someone stirring slightly in bed, adjusting a blanket, then stillness again. All around, sleep holds the village like a blanket itself, warm, enveloping, patient. The concept of shared sleep spaces is something else that made medieval rest distinct from the modern world. For many peasants, sleep wasn't a solitary act. Families often slept in one room, sometimes even in the same bed. Privacy, as we understand it now, was a luxury they didn't have, or, perhaps, didn't miss. The hearth was the center of warmth, so it made sense to gather near it. Parents, children, grandparents, sometimes even guests or neighbors, all sharing the heat, the protection, and the companionship of a common sleeping space. This kind of closeness, while unthinkable to many today, fostered a certain ease. The sounds of others breathing nearby, the occasional whisper, a snore, the soft rustle of shifting bodies, all of it formed a kind of lullaby. There was comfort in knowing you weren't alone, in knowing that if the wind howled outside, or a storm rolled over the hills, you would ride it out together, under the same roof, under the same heavy quilts. Sleep came, in this environment, not with struggle, but with surrender. The world outside might have been unpredictable, feudal obligations, crop failures, illness, but the night held a kind of consistency. It was a return to safety, to routine, to something that never changed, even as the rest of life did. For many peasants, the bed itself was modest, made of straw or simple feather-stuffed sacks. But there was a certain art to making these beds comfortable. Layers of woolen blankets, hand-woven linen, and furs collected over years. These were not store-bought comforts but gifts of labor and time. Blankets that had been patched by candlelight. Pillows that had passed from mother to daughter. A warmth not only of temperature, but of memory. And then there was the fire. Always the fire. Banked low, to keep the warmth without too much light. Its flicker cast gentle shadows that moved across the walls, the low ceiling beams, the resting faces of those nearby. It was not just a source of heat, it was a silent companion, watching over the sleepers, breathing softly in its embers, anchoring the night. The sounds of the medieval night were different, too. No buzzing electronics, no distant cars. Instead, the quiet pulse of nature. The low bark of a dog in the distance. The soft murmurs of livestock stirring in their pens. The wind in the trees. These sounds were familiar, part of the world the peasant knew intimately. Sounds that said, "You are home. You are safe." In this stillness, the mind was given space to rest. There were no endless to-do lists, no midnight email checks, no bright screens to jar the senses. When the body grew tired, and the chores were finished, there was little left to keep one awake. Just the slow descent into sleep, like slipping beneath the surface of a still pond. This pattern of life, work when the sun shines, rest when it sets, was enforced not by discipline, but by the environment itself. The natural world provided the rhythm, and people followed it without resistance. It is hard, in today's world, to imagine such a surrender. But for medieval peasants, it was simply the way things were. The day gave what it could. The night offered its peace. And so, each evening, as the candles were snuffed and the cottage grew dark, people gave themselves fully to rest. There was no guilt about it. No sense of laziness or lost productivity. To sleep was to prepare for another day of labor. Yes, but also to participate in something ancient. A ritual as old as time. A return to the womb of darkness, where the soul might unburden itself and dream without interference. And oh, the dreams. Imagine what it must be like to dream in that world. Without flashing advertisements or chaotic news cycles. Without plot twists and celebrity scandals flooding your subconscious. Instead, dreams might carry the sleeper through fields of wheat, through forests dappled with moonlight, to a memory of spring, or the soft face of a child long grown. The brain, uncluttered by modern media, might wander more gently, less frantically, and in the morning, there was no pressure to analyze those dreams, no compulsion to make sense of them. They could simply be what they were, whispers from the night, fading like mist as the light returned. The morning itself was a slow rising, not a jolt. The sounds of roosters, of sheep stirring, of someone in the next room stoking the fire again. Perhaps the scent of bread or porridge. The warmth of bodies nearby. People didn't leap from bed in a panic to meet a deadline. They rose because the sun called them, because the world outside was beginning again, because their place in it awaited. And in those waking moments, there might be a soft kind of reflection. Not the racing thoughts of modern anxiety, but the gentle noticing of a stiff shoulder, a dream half remembered, the creak of the floorboards as someone moved across them. Life was close, immediate, intimate. Not abstracted through glass and screens, but present, tactile, known. As we drift, now, through this imagining, you might begin to notice how your own breathing has slowed. How your body has begun to listen to the stillness we've conjured. The medieval world might seem distant, but its rhythms still live in you. Your body remembers. Your spirit longs for it. That simple world where night was for sleeping, and sleep was sacred. So if you feel a heaviness now behind your eyes, let it grow. If your thoughts begin to blur and dissolve like mist over the moors, let them. You are safe here, in this story. The fires have been banked. The stars are bright above the thatched roof. The wind carries only the sound of the trees. And within your heart, a quiet voice says, sleep. Sleep, not as retreat, but as arrival. As reunion with something you've always known. Let go. There is nothing to fix. Nothing to solve. Only this moment, this breath, this slow descent into rest. You are not in a hurry. You are not behind. The night welcomes you, as it once welcomed so many others. Let your mind drift. Let the images come and go. The worn stone path outside the cottage. The way the fire glows on wooden walls. The low murmur of someone praying softly beside you. And then, silence. You are floating now, carried by the current of a world long past, yet still alive inside you. Let that world hold you. Let it sing you to sleep. The stars will keep watch. And I will be here, still speaking gently, as you drift further, and further, and further into the peaceful, perfect night. The village lies quiet, wrapped in the velvet dark of the medieval countryside. There are no glowing signs, no blaring horns, no restless hum of traffic winding down distant streets. Just the hush of an ancient world, still and untouched, where sleep flows in like fog over the fields. A world without electricity, without the pressure of clocks ticking down the minutes, where rest was more than routine, it was rhythm. A gentle, necessary rhythm that pulsed through every day and every night. In this time, the night belonged to the earth and the stars. The candlelight flickering out marked the end of chatter, of chores, of movement. Outside the wooden homes, the land exhaled, and with it, so did its people. The village held its breath beneath the stars, as if the universe itself paused for a moment, allowing each soul to let go. The medieval peasant had no smartphones to scroll through, no emails to check before bed, no late-night shows stealing their attention. When the sun sank below the hills, it was not just the light that disappeared, but the bustle of thought. There was nothing more to do, nothing more to chase. The night wasn't a time to squeeze in one last task. It was a boundary, a release. And within that dark, cool stillness, people found the kind of sleep we now dream about having. The body, attuned to the light of the day, responded without hesitation. Melatonin, the sleep hormone, flowed naturally as the environment dimmed. There were no blue lights interrupting its production, no pings and dings signaling the next distraction. Just a simple quiet, deep and unwavering, coaxing even the busiest mind into slumber. And as sleep arrived, it was welcomed, not fought. There was no guilt, no sense of time wasted by resting. In fact, rest was a reward, a well-earned one. After a day of physical labor, of plowing fields, gathering wood, tending animals, the body ached for it. The mind, too, having faced no overwhelming flood of artificial input, had space to slow down, to transition smoothly into that precious realm of sleep, without being pulled backward by overstimulation. Many slept in what we might now call segmented sleep, two distinct phases, with a quiet period of wakefulness between. This pattern, known historically as first sleep and second sleep, was not seen as a disorder or inconvenience. It was simply how the body behaved when left to its own rhythms. After a few hours of rest, peasants might wake briefly in the stillness of night. During this in-between time, some prayed. Others talked softly with their bedfellows. Some even rose to tend to quiet tasks like checking on animals, or simply to sit by the fire, eyes half closed, watching the embers glow. This waking hour was not disruptive, it was peaceful. A lull in the dark, not quite asleep, not quite awake. An invitation to drift in and out, to enjoy the gentle space between deep rests. It was during these hours that the mind could wander without pressure. Some wrote, if they were literate. Others might reflect, or simply lie still, listening to the heartbeat of the night. Then, slowly, the second sleep would come. Deeper, perhaps, and even more nourishing. There was no fear of missing rest. No worry about tossing and turning. Sleep was not a commodity, but a presence. One that would come and go as it pleased, and was always welcome. The atmosphere of medieval homes supported this natural flow. Thick stone walls or timber frames muffled the wind. Thatched roofs kept rain from falling too hard on sleeping heads. In the colder months, warmth was preserved through shared bodies and heavy textiles. In warmer seasons, windows left open to the night air let the breath of the countryside wander in and out. Sounds, too, had a rhythm. A night owl in the trees. The faint low of a cow in its shelter. The soft scratching of a branch against the wall. These were not interruptions, but lullabies. Unlike the mechanical whirs and sirens of modern nights, these sounds reminded one of the earth's constant life, steady, slow, soothing. Even the spiritual beliefs of the time contributed to this sleep-friendly world. The medieval peasant saw sleep not just as bodily rest, but as a sacred gift. Many believed the soul traveled while the body rested. Dreams carried meaning. The night was a time when divine messages could come, when one might meet saints or ancestors in visions, when healing could occur. Sleep, then, was not just a break, it was communion. With God, with mystery, with the self. Rituals surrounded bedtime. A short prayer, the sign of the cross, a whispered blessing over a child. All of it created a sense of closure, a ceremony marking the passage from day into night. These moments, small and reverent, signaled to the body and mind, it is time to rest. You are safe. You are held. And the dreams that followed were quiet things, unburdened by flashing images and noisy narratives. They unfolded like tapestries. Long walks through familiar woods. Faces from the past. Songs without words. The brain, free from constant stimulation, had the room to spin its stories slowly, gently, without resistance. There was no caffeine to keep people awake long into the night. Number 24 our stores lit up with artificial light. The marketplace of dreams belonged solely to those who closed their eyes and gave in to the dark. And when they woke again, slowly, naturally, as the sun crept across the floorboards, it was with a sense of having truly rested. The kind of rest that goes deep into the bones, into the breath. And you, now, in this quiet space we've created, might feel the echo of that same rest approaching. The same surrender. There is nothing you need to do. Nothing to decide. The medieval world, with all its soft silences and early darkness, is opening its arms to you again. Inviting you back. Let your thoughts slow. Let your breath deepen. You are not in the present anymore. You are in a time where night was sacred, where sleep was honored, where no one told you to fight it, to outwork it, to delay it. You are lying on straw-stuffed bedding, warmed by wool, listening to the wind outside your cottage door. Someone near you shifts, exhales. The fire glows orange. The stars turn slowly overhead. And sleep waits, not with impatience, but with promise. Let yourself drift toward it. Let your muscles soften. Let the world fall away. Nothing more is needed tonight. You've walked far enough. You've listened long enough. Now, only this, quiet, and the dark, and the peace that medieval nights knew so well. The fire has burned low now. Just embers, glowing red in the hearth, their light barely flickering across the wooden walls of the peasant's home. The air has grown cooler. Outside, the sounds of the village have vanished completely. No voices, no movement. Only the soft, distant rhythm of a dog shifting in straw. Perhaps a breeze nudging a loose shutter. But even these are hushed, as if the world itself has tucked in for the night. It is in this perfect stillness that the medieval peasant truly found sleep. Not just the act of closing one's eyes, but the deep, untroubled drift into quiet unconsciousness. Not drugged, not disturbed, just sleep, whole, natural, and without resistance. Imagine lying there, your day complete. No unresolved notifications, no deadlines looming tomorrow. You've spent the sunlight hours in motion, walking to fields, gathering wood, preparing food. Not rushing, but moving steadily. Your body has worked in rhythm with the sun. Now, with the stars above, it has no reason to stay awake. Your limbs, warmed by the fire and the day's labor, settle into stillness easily. The straw-filled mattress is uneven, perhaps, but familiar. The rough wool blankets scratch a little, but they're heavy, grounding you, keeping the cold at bay. Around you, your family sleeps as well. A child curled near your side, an elder softly snoring on the other side of the room. It's not silence, but it's comfort. It's a world without isolation. Without the glowing screens that so often keep modern people alone in their own thoughts until late into the night. Here, the presence of others, breathing, dreaming, close by, only deepens the sense of safety. You are not alone in your sleep. You are surrounded by the same quiet that protects the whole village. In the cities, of course, things were louder, always. But in the countryside, where most peasants lived, night was not punctuated by sirens or passing engines. It was just the soft turning of the seasons, the occasional hoot of an owl, the wind whispering through trees that had stood for centuries. If sleep is the body's way of trusting the world for a few hours, then this was a world easy to trust. It's easy to romanticize the past. Yes, medieval life was not easy. It was full of hardship, disease, hunger, uncertainty. And yet, when the sun fell and the work ended, there was permission to stop. A freedom, in a way, that is missing today. No one expected productivity after dark. No one checked their progress late at night. The dark was the domain of sleep, of dreams, of the sacred quiet. It was not a time to be fought against. It was a time to surrender to. And surrendering became a ritual of its own. The shutting of a door. The final banking of the fire. A simple prayer whispered into the dark, thanking the saints for the day's safety. And then, just quiet. No lights flicked back on. No alarms set. Only the body reclining slowly, eyes adjusting to the moonlight slipping through wooden slats, mind beginning to drift. In these hours, dreams came easily. Perhaps simpler dreams than ours, fewer flashy images, fewer intrusions from digital memory. Just impressions, places, voices, maybe a loved one who passed long ago, or the next day's work imagined before it arrived. There was no urgency in these dreams. No noise, just soft inner landscapes, shaped by a day spent moving, speaking, listening, rather than scrolling, clicking, swiping. And the dreams, like the night, were often shared. In the morning, they were spoken aloud. Perhaps someone dreamt of a storm and took it as a warning. Or someone dreamt of a birth and smiled at its warmth. Dreams were not strange distractions to be ignored. They were seen as messages, glimpses into something more. Not everyone believed them, of course, but many respected them, listened to them, allowed them to become part of the slow rhythm of life. Some nights, people did wake up between sleeps. This was normal. Maybe the fire needed tending. Maybe a child stirred. Or maybe the body, having rested deeply for a few hours, simply opened its eyes for a time. These moments of wakefulness were not stressful. No one looked at a clock and calculated how little sleep they had left. No one panicked. They simply rested in that in-between time. Perhaps whispered a few words to a nearby sleeper. or sat quietly and listened to the night again. Then, as naturally as waking came, so too did the second sleep. Heavier, deeper. The kind of sleep that comes when the mind feels no pressure, no judgment. Just warmth. Just stillness. And slowly, the darkness returned to the edges of consciousness, like water rising around you. And down you sank again, floating weightless into that second rest. Even the architecture of medieval homes supported this flow. Thick walls made of wattle and daub, or stones packed with earth and straw, insulated the noise and temperature. The homes were not always spacious, but they cradled sleep well. There was no street lamp bleeding in through thin curtains. No phone glowing on a bedside table. The only light, if any, was the moon or a fading ember in the hearth. And when the rooster crowed or the light filtered through cracks in the thatch, waking was gentle. There was no sudden alarm, no blaring newsfeed. Just the awareness that morning had returned. That sleep had done its work. That it was time again to rise, slowly, to stretch cold limbs, to greet the day. There is something we've lost in the modern age. We've gained comfort, technology, convenience, but lost the permission to truly rest. To drift into sleep without apology. To wake slowly. To treat the night as sacred. To see sleep not as a weakness or obstacle, but as a gift. The medieval peasant, in all their hardship, knew that. They lived it. And perhaps you are starting to feel that rhythm now. The same rhythm that once flowed through forests and fields. The rhythm of dusk falling, of fires fading, of dreams whispering through the quiet. Let your shoulders drop. Let your eyes grow heavier. You are back in that cottage, tucked away from the world. There is no email, no urgency, no bright screens. Just the breath of night and the promise of deep, slow rest. The fire has gone out completely now. Just a faint warmth on the stones. But your body is warm. Your mind quiet. The room is dark and still. There is nothing more to hear tonight. Nothing more to say. Just the silence, wrapping around you like a blanket. Sleep is near. And you have permission, just like the peasants did, to welcome it in. To close your eyes. To let the world fall away. To follow the stars into dreams. Sleep in the medieval world wasn't just something people did. It was something they lived. It wasn't pushed to the margins of time, squeezed between distractions. It didn't come reluctantly, coaxed out by melatonin or humming sound machines. It arrived gently, like evening fog rolling across a quiet meadow. In those long hours after sunset, when the fields were dark and the animals had settled, sleep waited patiently, welcoming, inevitable. There was no need for the modern rituals of sleep hygiene. No blackout curtains, no circadian rhythm charts. What they had was far simpler. They had the dark, the cold, and the slow retreat of the world into silence. They had their bodies, tired from walking, lifting, tending, carrying. They had the quiet rustle of straw under a woolen blanket. They had time. Time that moved differently. Time that forgave you for doing nothing. That didn't ask for more once the sun had gone down. In some villages, the bells from a nearby abbey might chime softly into the night, marking the hours of monastic prayer. But even this was not disruptive. It was expected. The rhythm of the monks was like a heartbeat in the background. Reliable, distant, soft. For peasants, it was just another sign of the deep passage of night. Another reassurance that everything was as it should be. And inside their homes, there was nothing else demanding attention. No urgent messages pinging through. No glowing rectangles casting blue light across their faces. If there was light at all, it came from the hearth or a candle burning low, flickering, uncertain. But more often, there was only darkness. The kind of darkness we rarely experience now. A true, enveloping dark, where shadows disappeared into shadows and the line between waking and dreaming blurred like mist. Imagine yourself in that space now. The fire has long since turned to ash. The animals in the yard outside, perhaps a goat, a few hens, are quiet. The wind presses softly against the wooden walls. And you lie still, your breath slow, your limbs wrapped in the soft weight of sleep. There is nothing to do. Nowhere to go. You are not behind on anything. The village sleeps. The land sleeps. And so do you. Your body is aware of the chill in the air, but not troubled by it. It's expected. It's part of the experience. Maybe you've drawn your blanket tighter around you, or maybe you sleep close to another. There is warmth in that closeness, both physical and emotional. People didn't sleep apart back then. The idea of separate bedrooms was foreign to most. Privacy was rare, but intimacy was constant. You shared sleep, just as you shared meals, stories, and songs. If you wake during the night, and many did, it isn't with panic. There is no clock glowing in red digits reminding you that you're losing sleep. You don't feel the pressure to get back to sleep immediately. Instead, you lie there, listening to the stillness. Maybe you stir the embers a little, or sip some water from a clay cup. You might speak in hushed tones to your spouse or child. Or not. You might simply lie there, half awake, half dreaming, until sleep gathers you again, and you slip back under. In some places, this time between sleeps, the gentle pause in the middle of the night, was even seen as sacred. A moment of quiet reflection. A time for prayer, or thought, or soft conversations. Not a problem to be fixed, but a gift. The dark was not an enemy to be conquered with bulbs and screens. It was a companion. It asked nothing of you but stillness. And that stillness extended beyond the night. Even in the way they rose in the morning, peasants embraced a different rhythm. The day didn't start with a blaring alarm or a calendar full of appointments. It began with the light. The slow change in the sky from deep blue to silver. The soft crowing of a rooster. The shifting of others in their sleep, beginning to stir. Maybe a dog stretching, tail thumping once on the floor.